Alright, I'm with Deputy Jeremy Masson. We're talking about scrutiny. This is part 2 on scrutiny because we just had a discussion with 2 other deputies about the same subject. You're on scrutiny panels, you're also on the chairman's panel. So you can tell us a bit about the new regime and how it came about, scrutiny, the friendlier face of scrutiny that we've had since the last election.
In some regards, yeah, I'm chairman of the Education and Home Affairs panel, which automatically puts me on the chairman's committee for my sins. What exactly do you want to know? Well,
they've said they want non-confrontational scrutiny, and that's the official line. I mean, it's where it's actually come from. I think there were various people, especially Newsom, obviously Sir Philip Bash, obviously is very keen on non-confrontational scrutiny, and that seems to have come down to the system. And certainly, as a regular person who attends scrutiny, I've attended more scrutiny than anybody else in the island, I think. Even some of the panel members, I suspect. They run very efficiently. They start at 2 o'clock. They do start at 2 o'clock if that's the declared time. And if they're going to finish at 3:30, they finish at 3:30. But
as were the public complaints at the time.
Indeed. So that side of it has been made much more user-friendly, much more professional. There's not allowed to eat in scrutiny anymore, which is people having their sandwiches and chomping away and speaking. It was very unprofessional. But all that's been removed. It's all been changed, and that's to the good. And from that aspect, it's very efficient. But is it being more efficient? Because it seems to me that the argument is being taken out of it. Dissent is being taken out of it.
I think I don't have enough time to sit and watch other scrutiny panels, so I can only really talk about my own. And yeah, absolutely, I think we have had this debate in that the thrust is to kind of make things, well, first of all it was more business-like, and to which many of us objected because we're not businesses, we're government, it's different. So we said, but more professional, which is why we've done some of the changes in that regard. I have to say, I think part of the risk on scrutiny is there's always a risk you can get too close to your ministerial team, which means that you're not challenging things properly, and that's wrong. And I think there's always going to be that concern depending on the member, depending on the panel. I do my best to try and keep my ministers at a distance to avoid that kind of conflict. But I think to an extent it's also a stylistic thing. Sometimes you can get more information out of people, because scrutiny, that's what you want. You want the evidence, you want the information. And sometimes taking perhaps a calmer, less confrontational approach is an easier way of getting the evidence, getting the information out of people, because they're relaxed and so they give more away. And in scrutiny, that's what you want. You want the information. And so that's a stylistic thing. Not always. Sometimes, recently we had one with the Minister of Health and Social Services, and I was pressing her on a disagreement that she had with the Home Affairs Minister. She didn't like to, but about the second or third time I got her to say, yes, I don't like to disagree with my colleagues publicly, but no, I think the Home Affairs Minister's got it wrong. So I think it's a stylistic thing primarily.
Well, this goes at the very heart of the problem. Nobody likes to disagree with anybody else, and this is the tenor now, is for everybody to be friendly and agreeing. And basically topics which come down from the States Assembly are basically, to my perception, being sent down to scrutiny, not to be criticised and found fault with and sent back with we want this changed written all over it, but it's basically to make it work and not to be too disagreeable. Now, that seems to be not, in my perception, what a scrutiny ought to be. It depends upon the political views of the people who are sitting on scrutiny. And obviously, if they're basically the same as the people who legislated in the first place, nothing's going to change, is it?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair observation to make, and I say observation because you're absolutely right. If you do come from the same political leanings of the Minister of the Department that comes in, you're absolutely right. Though, what I will say, my particular scrutiny panel, for example, when we did our taser review, we said we totally disagreed. Well, we didn't totally disagree. We said, actually, you don't have the evidence in order to justify this, so go away. So I think scrutiny on certain topics
the Minister, the result of the taser was the Minister said he's going to go away and do it anyway, by the sound of it. He's going to have his tasers if he wants them. If the police chief wants his tasers, he'll have them. So the process didn't seem to really add much to knowledge, did it?
Well, he's always given the undertaking that it will come to a States Assembly debate. He said he's going to go away and refine his proposition in order to address the issues that we've raised. Whether he does that satisfactorily, at the end of the day, is going to be a matter for states members in the Assembly. And one of the issues with scrutiny is that it's only ever going to be as powerful as members within the States Assembly allow it to be.
But of course, if reports were so strong from scrutiny against policies coming down, I mean, presumably government wouldn't be able to stop sending them down, but they would just go into a huff and just ignore them totally, wouldn't they? I mean, they're not. The scrutiny make their reports stronger and stronger. Is it going to have the opposite effect of what you want? I mean, I don't know what happens.
Well, we did have that point. For example, we came back with our depositor compensation scheme report in the last term, and we didn't quite condemn the proposals, but we said, you know, it's totally not good enough. We lodged several amendments to the legislation itself. I think we got 1 out of 5 or something, because that's what the states members were willing to accept, despite producing the evidence and making the argument in that case. However, interestingly, the changes have come back, and at the time, I mean, it almost resulted in a vote of no confidence in the chairman, Deputy Mike Higgins at the time, because he dared to put his foot down on these matters, and the ministers were very scathing of the scrutiny panel at that time. It's come back this time, and apparently now it's a very helpful and useful scrutiny report, and we're so grateful for the scrutiny members taking their time and reporting.
Well, pleased to hear that. The subject we were touching on earlier with the previous deputies I was discussing was the future implications under electoral commissions to reduce the number of people available to do scrutiny or to do anything, in other words, the magic 42 figure. Now, my perception of scrutiny, and certainly correspondence I've been having, it's already extremely overloaded with work. It can't deal with all the subjects it would like to deal with. And obviously it states there also, they say, would you want to look at this scrutiny? And they say, no, we don't want to look at it. I suspect very often because they simply haven't got any time to look at it. And that's stuff which comes down from the States. Now, I had a list the other day, 2010, of the publicly submitted topics, and that was 67 topics, very few of which were ever taken up. Now, obviously, most of those, I suspect, were perfectly valid topics for reviews to take place, but very few were taken up. So it seems to me the system is already bugged up, and even if you reduce the number of people available to do it under the Magic 42 formula, it virtually must collapse, mustn't it?
If you keep the structure as it is, I think that is a fair observation, and I agree, yes, we are struggling with the amount that we've got to at the moment. The worst one affected is the Health, Housing and Social Security panel. I mean, that panel needs to be split, and there needs to be another one there, because they can't possibly. Health and Social Services should have its own scrutiny panel on its own, in my opinion. But yeah, we are struggling, and I think it depends whether you keep constables in or not, because at the moment it's brilliant. I've got 2 constables on my panel, and it's great, but how long that situation can carry on for, because now that they're getting into the system, learning more things, and they've got all their commitments in the parish, and a constable will always say their first commitment is to their parish work, and everything else comes secondary. So already you've got, although those members are working 100% doing whatever they're doing, you know, they can only commit 50% to the kind of the state side of the work. So if, I mean, you say 42, but already you've got 30 who can contribute, you've got another 12 who are half diverted somewhere else, and it's even more demanding in the more urban parishes. And I think, you know, I don't, and then you've got to calculate those members who don't like scrutiny, who don't believe it will work, and who will opt out of the system, or who just can't get along with anyone else. Again, you then take that slice out of those members who you've got available from the pool. You're talking about one panel which has already got several ministries to look at. There's talk of actually creating new ministries, so those will have to be scrutinised. So yeah, I don't see how it can be done personally. If you keep the system, if you then accept the quasi-committee system, which is the ministerial board system, which is members can scrutinise departments that they're not part of if they're an assistant minister. Say if you're an assistant minister for education, you may be able to scrutinise, say, economic development or transport technical services or something like that. But members elected into Assembly, they want to be part of the executive, they want to be part of the government, they want to be making decisions, they want to be progressing things. Scrutiny is a methodical, laborious process in which it has to be to gather all the evidence. You know, it's not the most attractive piece of work for members when their primary goal is they want to be making decisions on behalf of the public.
I raised a question the other day about the terms of reference for scrutiny, which requires you to look at international obligations and so on. And I asked when that has ever taken place, and they wrote back that they're not aware this has ever taken place. Now that's in your terms of reference for scrutiny to do that. Now I very seldom ever hear international obligations raised during the course of an inquiry. Now something like health, there are huge international implications for lots of treatments and lots of things that go on. Education the same, I mean social security is huge. It's hardly ever raised. I mean, the very parochial view of so many states members put into scrutiny, they're not demanding, they're not asking questions which are anything to do with anything that goes beyond the shores of this little island. It's a bit naive, isn't it?
Yes and no. I think it's a fair observation to make, and maybe that is a failing of the members, and we do need to be better at that. At the same time, there is always the very strong view how Jersey people don't necessarily like being told from international bodies how they should go about their business, and you've always got that internal conflict. But you always want to take good, better practice, don't you? What will be better for the people you're serving? Sometimes if these obligations are not necessarily going to be the best, because they're not always the best.
The anti-discrimination legislation, if it finally does ever arrive, is going to land on your desk or somebody's panel's desk.
Social security.
Right, so somebody's going to have to look at it, and it will overlap into other departments because the implications of it will have home affairs implications, so it could spread far and wide, couldn't it? The application of anti-discrimination law could be very far-reaching.
It could be, but I mean, what we can do, for example, is if you wanted to not tread on other people's toes or have that buy-in from other scrutiny panels, you can do joint committee panels, as you'll know. Whether that necessarily means you get more expertise is another matter, but there are mechanisms if it is felt that crosses over. But there's nothing stopping one, say, the social scrutiny panel doing it. Then the chairman's going to agree, right, that's fine, and you can contact the relevant ministers and bring the relevant ministers in to ask them, which sometimes is a better approach.
I'm unusual.